Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be talking about Stephen King's 1992 novel Gerald's Game. I will demonstrate what to look for when trying to identify a first US and first UK edition of the book. The US edition was published by Viking. This is the front cover, spine, back cover, big author picture. Inside the front jacket, look for a price of $23.50. And on the copyright page, look for a number line that includes the number 1. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy peasy on this one to determine if you have a first edition. Underneath the jacket, dark gray boards with SK's initials printed in foil, black cloth over the spine, red and gold foil printing over the spine. All in all, it's a pretty good looking book. The title and Stephen King's name are heavily embossed in the front cover, really pop out and look pretty nice. The first UK edition was published by Hodder and Stoughton. It's the back cover, spine, front cover. Inside on the front flap, look for a price of £14.99, net in UK. And on the copyright page, look for the language first published in Great Britain, 1992. Underneath the jacket, whoops, pretty typical for UK editions, single color all around. In this case it's black, also very common for UK editions, with gold printing on the spine. Pretty basic and plain, but not a bad looking book. So there's the UK edition. In a side-by-side comparison of the front cover artwork, both editions represent a similar thing. Handcuffs around bedpost. I think that the UK edition suffers a little bit because the image is so much darker. It takes place at night. It conveys important facts and factors about the story, but it makes you work a little bit harder to determine exactly what this is and what you're seeing. The US one, I think, is the better of the two because it's brighter, it's easier to see. The embossing, while not necessarily a factor of the artwork, really does stand out and catch the eye. And the UK font used for the title is pretty mannered and not necessarily very sinister, whereas the US, the title looks pretty, I don't know, gruesome, scary, written in blood, dangerous, violent. Anyway, it catches the eye, and I really like how the shape, the knob on top of the bedpost is in the form of a female figure. That's not something that you necessarily catch at first glance, but it's something that, it's a little detail that pops out. And so between the two of these, I would give the nod to the US edition. To date, Gerald's Game is one of the titles in Stephen King's bibliography that has not received any kind of special, signed, limited, any type of edition either in the US or the UK, which the list of those has gotten so long that it's actually pretty remarkable when there's a title that has never received that treatment. But Gerald's Game is on that list. Gerald's Game was originally intended to be slightly shorter, I think novella length, and partnered with also a shorter version of Dolores Claiborne, the book that immediately the novel that follows Gerald's Game in publication. And the two stories together were going to be called In the Path of the Eclipse. That was going to be the name of the book that both stories appeared in. Both stories share a natural event as one of the plot points, a total eclipse of the sun on Saturday, July 20th, 1963. The path of totality, according to the book, coming from 5:41 to 5:45 p.m. In both books, to both main characters, dramatic business happens. Very well rendered, very spooky, very atmospheric during the time of totality from the eclipse. And in both novels, the main characters are aware somehow, psychically, psychologically, that something has happened to the other one. Even though they don't know who that person is, they have a sense of that person and that something has happened. So they are very much linked. And Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne are both fairly thrifty books in terms of page count, especially after 4 Past Midnight, The Stand, Needful Things, which particularly Needful Things has been accused, and maybe rightfully so, of being bloated and overwritten. Gerald's Game comes in at around 335 pages. So it's relatively fleet and sleek and fast moving for this period for Stephen King. And my only read through of Gerald's Game came years and years and years ago. I was a teenager, and for some reason, Gerald's Game seemed like a good one to pick up, probably because it wasn't so incredibly long. And I remember being fascinated by it, enthralled by it. The ending, there's a scene that I'll try not to spoil, but there's an ending with a character reveal, and it's one of the scariest things that I've ever read, at least when I read it years and years ago. I remember being literally chilled as I was reading it. And now, over time, I've really appreciate that Stephen King was trying to challenge himself, and he was trying something new. I think he had often been accused of not being able to write women realistically or believably, and also accused of overwriting and this bloat. So he comes out with 2 novels back to back that are both from the main the main character perspective is a woman. Dolores Claiborne is probably even more stylistically challenging and daring than Gerald's Game. But after these broad canvases with all of these characters, I think it's fascinating. I think it's brave that Stephen King basically, you have 2 main characters in this book, and one of them is only in the book right at the very beginning. And other than that, you have one person trapped in a bed, and there's so much plot, there's so much memory. A lot happens in the character's head, understandably, because they're connected to this bed. They can't get up. But it kind of makes me think of movies like Rear Window or Lifeboat, the Alfred Hitchcock movie that takes place almost entirely with one group of characters in a lifeboat. It's just a challenge, an artistic challenge that I think gets the juices going, and at least in the case of Gerald's Game, results in one of his, I would say, more underappreciated, because he's got so many books, and it's easy for quality work to kind of get swept along when it doesn't reach that iconic status, and so many other books just follow it and almost bury it. But Gerald's Game is an excellent Excellent Stephen King. It is artistically very interesting and refreshing. It is plenty scary, and although it takes place basically with one character connected to a bed, it is gripping, and I remember it as being very exciting, and I highly recommend it. I think it's a good place for it would be a good place for someone to start if they don't know where to start with Stephen King, and they're more familiar with the classics because of movies that they've seen, and like, well, I could read Carrie, but gosh, I've seen 3 different movie versions of that, and I feel like I know the story inside and out. Well, Gerald's Game is kind of a under the radar, high quality place to start, in my opinion. I don't know exactly what the novel looked like in its original shortened form. I don't. It is still fairly short in terms of page count. Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne packed together in their current iterations would probably be around the same as Needful Things is on its own. So it could be that there wasn't much additional content added, or it could be that the decision was made that, hey, there's a lot of quality stuff here, so why don't you go back to the well and expand these out, and they became standalone releases, and to me, 2 of the more interesting in Stephen King's long career. So anyway, thank you very much for your time and for your support. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I will talk to you later. Bye.